Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights, B2B selling today. It's never been harder. It's complex, a lot of moving parts, really understanding and knowing so much about your target customer. I mean, that's where it all begins. But also, what if we were able to boost the confidence in those customers, in those prospects, by just an order of magnitude, the difference that it can make to long-term success? We're going to get into all of those dynamics of successful B2B selling today with Brent Adamson. And he's a world-renowned researcher, author, presenter, trainer, and advisor to B2B commercial executives around the world. He's the co-founder of A2B Insight. That's a B2B go-to-market advisory. He's also the author of a new book, The Framemaking Sale. Sell more by boosting customer confidence, but he's also written some other really interesting and relevant publications. He is the co-author of a best-selling, industry-changing book, The Challenger Sale. That's nearly 1 million copies sold so far. He's a frequent contributor to leading publications, including Harvard Business Review. In fact, his article, The End of Solution Sales, remains one of the top 5% most consumed HBR articles of all times. He's a presenter to hundreds of thousands, both in person and virtually all over the world. And he's an incredible, passionate advocate for productive disruption. He served as the chief storyteller for CEB, now Gartner's sales, marketing, and customer service practices for almost 20 years. So he knows about this topic. He's passionate. Brent, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Well, thank you, Dan. You know what happens when your introduction is that long? There's a logistic regression or something. It just means you're old. It just means like the longer. What is the correlation between the longer the introduction and the older you are? As I'm now 250 years old, I think. There you go.
Well, so much that you've accomplished, and I want to really go back and this amazing, interesting journey that you've taken. What originally sparked your passion to pursue a career that was really rooted in and around research and analytics?
So it actually goes back long before I did anything with sales and marketing, and it's a long story here, so I'll just give you the abbreviated version. But believe it or not, 25 years ago, I used to be a German professor. So I was on the faculty at Michigan State in tenure track, halfway to tenure, teaching what's called applied linguistics, which is foreign language education, and teaching educators and researching the heck out of that. And decided that, wow, I'm never really going to make any money doing this. And it took me 15 years of grad school to realize that, of course, because I'm an idiot. And so I went to business school and got a degree, and then I found this company called Corporate Executive Board, which does, at the time, did three things. CEB, which is eventually acquired by Gartner many years later. But CEB was a company that did three things really well. We researched the heck out of stuff, we taught the heck out of stuff, and then we sold the heck out of stuff that we researched and taught. So I became and it just so happened that the job that was open the year I was coming out of business school was a job in the sales practice. It could have been anything. It could have been supply chain. It could have been HR, but it was sales. And so they offered me a job, and 20 years later, I was, researching. So basically, I've got a 35-year career, Dan, of researching and teaching. And just what I put through that pipeline about halfway through, or about 1/3 of the way through, just changed radically.
Yeah, I mean, from linguistics to the language of business, which is what you're looking at right now. So there is some connective tissue there. And
there is.
When you reflect back on this journey, what's been some of the biggest personal learning you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
I think my biggest learning is also my biggest surprise, but it's also the subject of a lot of what I write about, which is, Dan, I don't know about you, but here's my conclusion in life. I'm 57, so I'm not super old, but I'm old enough now to know that to take away here's my big takeaway. None of us know what we're doing. That's it. There's like literally not a single one of us knows what we're doing. I've been a parent for 20 years. I have no idea how to be a decent father. Hopefully I'm not screwing it up. It's like when I look at Challenger customer in the Framemaking Sale or Challenger Sale, the sort of the heartbeat of that story is customers don't really know what they're doing. We're trained to say the customer's always right. It's like map the customer buying journey the way they want to buy. It's like they don't know how to buy. It's like they don't know what they're doing. It's like, and there's some point you realize, I don't know, in your 30s or 40s. Have you had this yet, where you wake up one morning and realize, wait, this is all like literally like stuck together with bubble gum and duct tape, and none of us know what we're doing. I don't know. Is that just me, or is that you
Well,
too?
I think when we look at our life paths, right? I mean, we can go back and trace that. And some of the biggest milestones weren't necessarily the result of highly planned, predictable kinds of processes or paths, right? I mean, sometimes it's just serendipity. Sometimes it's just unexpected turns in our life. So some of the greatest outcomes, there's a randomness almost to it.
Yeah. But it's also kind of like, so I don't know if people think, first of all, it's probably a weird thing to say for a lot of people, but to me, it's kind of hopeful, which is if none of us know what we're doing, then maybe there's an opportunity for all of us just to help each other out a little bit. You know what I mean? If we can approach this from like, Dan, I know you're working your butt off and you're just trying to make a living and you're just trying to do the best you can. And let me see if I can just help you out with that. It's that there's, to me, when you come at things from a understanding that people could use help if they were just brave enough to ask for it, it allows you to approach everything from a posture of, let me see if I can help somehow. And I find that somehow reassuring.
Yeah. And the psychology of that too, when we receive those kind of inbound messages of earnestness, authentic help, we're drawn to that, I think, a lot more than when it's, hey, listen, there's an air of superiority or intelligence that I'm going to now impart to you. I mean, there's a difference, isn't there, in that line?
Yeah, in fact, if we want to get wonky about it, we actually have data that shows, at least in sales and selling and buying, which is when you show up as a seller with this sort of posture of an expert. I've been doing this for 30 years, Dan. Here's what you need to do. It turns out that you actually do material damage to customers' confidence in making a decision, and ultimately a decision for a bigger, more complex deal, what we call a high quality, low regret purchase. And so that's all. Again, I told you I get a little wonky on it, but there's a really interesting. It's okay to be an expert. It's okay to have expertise. It's okay to have experience. But just the way that you present it and you bring it into the world and share it is not as like, oh, you don't know what you're doing. Let me help you out with that. Let me take care of that for you. Versus like as a co-learner, as someone that's like just on this journey together, which is, Dan, I work with a lot of people in a similar situation. One of the things I've been surprised to learn is we actually unpack, we call this the phrase that frames in the Framemaking Sale. And we talk about it, and again, in the sales context of just how to approach customers from this position, not of, it doesn't have to be of humility per se, but certainly of a position of co-learning, of like, let's do this together. Let's kind of figure this out together, as opposed to here's what you need to do. And I find it works pretty well in human relations, not just in business ones.
Yeah. And it also allows you to avoid blurring that line between confidence and being condescending, right? And arrogance.
Sometimes. I have been accused. And by the way, this is frustrating. Has this ever happened to you where you do something, you say something with the best of intentions, and it's just read out of context, and someone's kind of coming at, sort of analyzing your behavior from their mental model, their worldview. And so they take something you meant in all earnestness as helpful, and they see it as unhelpful, or something that you meant as humility, and they take it as arrogance. And it's always such a frustrating thing when that happens, because it's like, wow, where did we disconnect? We clearly went right past each other somewhere. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it also gets compounded in terms of the channel and when and how we're communicating, like email communication. I mean, there's so many stories of trying to interpret someone's intent or misinterpreting it, that's not there. And it's easier to do. It seems like if we're communicating through social media channels, through Slack channels or email, versus a more vibrant, personal conversation like you and I are having right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, social media is a bit of a disaster in the comment section, right? But what's interesting is it's in some people's interest to drive that wedge between us all, right? That for those of us trying to find this human connection and this common connection, that doesn't serve everybody well, right? There are people whose interests are served better when we can't find common ground, and that's And it could be in politics, but it also could be in social media, where, in fact, if we're divisive with one another, we're more likely to engage, because the sort of engagement from enragement sort of idea, which is a bummer, because you go back to your earlier question about sort of lessons you've learned in life. I think one of the lessons we're all learning in our lives right now is that there's a small but very powerful group of interests in the world that profit from our struggle to find common connection, and we are falling prey to those interests, I think, right now.
Yeah. Now,
I got deep. Sorry.
Well, there are so many companies out there trying to figure out this magic formula when it comes to B2B sales right now.
Yeah.
And when you look at that landscape, Brent, what are some of the most common mistakes you see companies making there?
Well, it's funny. I think that the biggest mistake, and I don't know that it's intentional, but it's the gravitational pull towards this mistake is so strong, it's almost unavoidable. But I think the mistake we make in B2B sales is the same mistake we all make in high school dating, right? Which is we are trying to solve for, in B2B sales at least, dating, I don't go there. I was a miserable failure at that. But we're trying to solve for customers' perceptions of us. Right. It's just, we think that the number one way to get customers to buy our solution is to value our solution, to value our people, to see us as a trusted advisor, see us as a thought leader. If you could just see how great our solution is, that will take care. You'll buy it. And I think that's in many ways what the Framemaking Sale is all about, is that we're solving. It's not to say that that's a wrong thing or a bad thing to do. It's just woefully insufficient when the number one cause of customers ultimately not buying isn't their supplier perception, it's their self-perception. It's not that they're not confident in you, it's that they're confident, they lack confidence in themselves. And so this is why I stopped kind of everything and quit my job. I tell people now I'm all in. I just don't know if it's on red or black, but but I put everything into this book to sort of spend some time sort of examining and trying to understand this really interesting dynamic of what would it look like to engage customers specifically from the perspective of solving not for their supplier perception, but their self-perception, because it's just the data tells us it's like the wormhole, the shortcut to growth. And we're all kind of walking right past it.
And, we're complex, us human beings, right? And we talk all the time about.
Hold on, I'm from Omaha, Dan. So I'm a very simple human being. So
okay, well, it's left brain and right. There's left brain and right brain, right? And so kind of
for me, it's Chipotle and pizza and Diet Coke. That's it. That's all that matters. And Runza if you're a Nebraskan. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to knock you off your game. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so when you're talking there about overemphasizing, attributes about ourselves in terms of trying to get a buyer to be motivated. Yeah. And yet it's a lot about themselves in terms of how they feel about themselves. Aren't we really moving into that realm of how can you make a true emotional connection and recognize that, yes, there's going to be an element of emotion and feeling involved, even in a B2B versus a B2C sale?
100%. So just to put some real data and some brass tacks around this, because you caught me on sort of a reflective day. So I've been kind of off in, the abstraction land for the first part of our conversation. So here's something really concrete. So one of the things, while I was still at CB Gartner, working with some of the world's best researchers, trying to understand as best as we possibly could, what are the things that need to happen in a sale or in a purchase in order to increase the likelihood of customers buying a bigger deal or a bigger purchase with a broader scope, with a higher price point. We call that a high quality deal. And usually when you buy something that's big and complex, it comes with a certain amount of buyer remorse or regret. So what we're really looking for is the unicorn, which is how do I increase the likelihood of customers buying a high quality deal with less regret? So we call that a high quality, low regret deal. And Dan, all the things, and we studied this question for a number of years with all sorts of really robust data from B2B buyers, looking at different attributes like seller skills and sales process techniques, sales techniques. We looked at marketing attributes. We looked at customer buying group configuration. Anything we could think of, at least, we ran it through this model. And once all that research was done over the course of years, there was one attribute in particular that jumped out well above everything else, like way above. I know that's not scientific-y sounding, but it was an order of magnitude higher than anything else. So everything else was like a 10% or a 100% increase. This was a 900 or a 10x increase. And that was simply the degree to which customers report a high degree of confidence in the decisions that they're making on behalf of their company. So we call this decision confidence. And when customers are when customers report a high degree of confidence or high degree of decision confidence, again, they're not 10% more likely to buy a high quality, low regret deal. They're 10 times more likely.
Wow.
Again, this is the most powerful shortcut to driving growth for your company we've ever seen. And then when you unpack that dimension of confidence, so here's what happens. It's exactly your earlier question. So when I find particularly CEOs, sales leaders look at this big bar on this bar chart that says decision confidence has this massive impact, a lot of people say, my conclusion is we need to run everything through this lens. Everything that we do in sales, marketing, success, service, go-to-market, B2B, B2C. I know you asked about B2C too. Let's park that for a second. We can come back to that. But in B2B, as we think about engaging customers, we need to run everything through the lens of customer confidence. What are we doing? How are we engaging? How are we interacting? How are we selling? How are we talking to them in such a way that we're increasing their confidence in making something bigger than a simple decision for status quo? And what's interesting there is when CEOs and heads of sales hear that, they say, "Yep, we agree. We should run everything through the lens of customer confidence." That's why we talk so much about why customers have to be confident in our people and our product, and confident in us as trusted advisors, confident in us as thought leaders. And it sounds familiar, right? And what's interesting is and confidence in our features and benefits, here's a good one: confident in our value. They've got to understand our value.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when you unpack this data and you dig into this idea of decision confidence, it turns out that's not what it's about at all. So the single biggest driver of driving growth for your company is this idea of decision confidence, but this decision confidence attribute isn't anything that we think it is when we talk about confidence. Instead, it's actually things like, as a customer, how confident am I that I've even asked the right questions in the first place? How confident am I that I've thoroughly examined alternatives? How confident am I that I've done sufficient research, particularly in a world where there's no end of research that can be done? Essentially, it's like, how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? How do I know that I'm asking the right questions? How do I know when to pull up and shoot? And there's a longer version of this, but there's two things going on there. But the one I'll point out right now is when you look at those dimensions of confidence, not a single one of them has anything to do with the supplier. How confident are we that we asked the right questions? How confident are we that we did sufficient research? And when I always ask people, like, so where's the supplier in all this? The answer is they're not. And that to me tells me that really the single biggest driver of growth isn't customers' confidence in you; it's customers' confidence in themselves. So that's the run up to this deal. And so we could talk about sort of what to do about how to create it. But I wanted to give you that background just from a data perspective, because this isn't just like we all should like kumbaya, love each other and help each other feel good. I mean, there's really rock solid research behind this that says this is the shortest, most dramatic path to growth and loyalty that we've ever seen.
Wow. I mean, given that revelation, that it's more about the confidence in themselves rather than us projecting credibility, and kind of that external confidence. In your new book, you advocate for a new approach. It's built on this idea of frame making.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more? What does this really mean then if we're a B2B leader in terms of what we should really be focusing on and doing to address that?
Yeah. Well, so the first step is to understand, if it's all about confidence, there's a really interesting question, which is, okay, so how are customers doing right now? So where do they stand relative to confidence? I think we'd all agree, and we have data to back it up, not in a very good place, right? So B2B buying, irrespective of how we're selling, B2B buying is broken. And customers today, we find, are just incredibly overwhelmed. And specifically, they're overwhelmed across at least 4 dimensions that we talk about in the book. There's probably some others, but there's 4 main dimensions. One is decision complexity. It's just incredibly hard to navigate decisions inside our own organization. One is information overload, which is we just live in a world, particularly now with AI, there's no end of information I can consume. And with each piece, I get more confused and more overwhelmed. I don't gain more clarity. So decision complexity, information overload, objective misalignment. That's when, Dan, I'm sure it's happened to you in your career, but it's like when that customer says to you, Dan, if it were just up to me, I'd buy this today. It's like, but it's not, because there's like 5 to 10 to 15 to 150 other people behind that all have to be aligned, not around how great you are, but they have to be aligned around a common objective, what they're even trying to do in the first place. So objective misalignment and being confident that you're aligned is really, really hard. And then finally is outcome uncertainty, which is we know that, you can tell me all the ROI, show me all the ROI documents you want. You can tell me all about you show me the customer testimonies. You can show me your raving fans and all the value you've created at other companies. And I will even believe it. I'll look you right now and say, no, I believe it. But somehow this doesn't apply to us because, we're kind of dysfunctional. We're different. We're going to find some way to screw this up. That, in other words, customers, it's not that they lack confidence in your statements of your value. They lack confidence in their ability to actually execute. So again, decision complexity, information overload, objective misalignment, and outcome uncertainty. Now, for each one of those different forces or challenges that are undermining customer confidence, what we argue in the book, and hopefully in a compelling way and a practical way, is that there are ways for sellers, and by the way, this comes up a lot. By sales, I mean go to market. So in other words, sellers could be hunters or farmers. It could be account managers. It could be success leaders. It could be your sales engineers. It could be it could be your marketing team. Or so I use the term sales here very broadly. But there's an opportunity for your sellers to be helpful. So take decision complexity. Your customers run into obstacles inside their own organization with their colleagues. The procurement gets involved and they blow everything up. It's the sales prevention department. Or here comes legal and they've got questions. Oh my God, we just hired a new CISO and she's asking questions we don't know. It's like, this is why I'm so frustrated. We can't get anything done in my company. I swear I work at the world's most dysfunctional company. By the way, we are all convinced we work at the world's most dysfunctional company.
Yes, we are.
Right. And I've become convinced we're all correct. I'm an entrepreneur with one other colleague, and I believe I work at the world's most dysfunctional company, and it's me. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is kind of where we are. But the opportunity becomes, what if your seller showed up rather than like just trying to run their sales process, or even in a more quote unquote enlightened way of showing up and saying, tell me how you buy and I'll align my sales process to your buying process. Again, going back to my earlier point, what if customers don't know? What if none of us know what we're doing? What we really need here is just someone to help, someone to coach me, guide me, take me by the hand figuratively, because literally it would be weird, and guide me through the process of my own company's dysfunction. Help me figure out how to manage and navigate my own organization. And if you can show up in that moment, and to our earlier point, rather than saying, I've been doing this for 30 years, here's what you need to do, which does not work because that's solving for customers' confidence in you, not customers' confidence in themselves. But if you show up with the one thing customers want more than anything else, which is social proof, they're not going to say it like that. What they're going to say is, what I really want to know is what other companies like us have done in this situation. So give them what they want, because this. Either you individually or you collectively as a team, you've watched other companies go down this journey already, and you've watched them wipe out. You've watched them succeed. You've watched them struggle. You've watched them, avoid landmines. And using that collective experience, you can show up to your customer with a posture of, in working with other customers like you, one of the things that we've learned is X, and we call that the phrase that frames. And the phrase that frames is just this really powerful way of just framing, rather than being frame breaking, which challenge is all about being frame breaking, like bending your customer, challenging thinking, showing them a new way to think about their business, which I still think is absolutely valid. But in this world where customers are overwhelmed, rather than being frame breaking, what if our biggest opportunity to drive customer self-confidence is to be frame making, to take something big and hard and overwhelming and just put a framework around it, make it feel a little bit more doable, a little bit more easy, while giving them the agency to believe that they can make the right decision for themselves. There's 250 pages and about a 5-minute rant, Dan. Sorry about that.
No, you're hitting on some really, really important points. And, I've worked in several global B2B organizations. And, one of the fallacies that I think an easy trap to fall into is that we need to project ourselves, because we're thinking confident and competent and proven.
100%.
That we want that we need to project ourselves as being infallible, and yet,
this is why we put on the fancy suit and put on the cologne when we go out to the singles bar. The single bars still exist. I don't know if that's a thing, but you know what I mean? Like when we're out trying to find a friend or a mate or someone to date or whatever, and again, you just like you want to make your product as good as you can. You want to make your suit look as nice as you can. You probably want to take a shower that day, right? But at the end of the day, the way that you ultimately help you build that relationship is by being the person who shows up to help that other person feel great about themselves. And right, and it's humanity, right? It's the heart and soul of human relations. And why would we ever think that just because it's B2B buying that there isn't a human connection there that can at least be made, if not has to be made, can be made, and that's your opportunity. And we're all walking past. Yeah,
part of that is just that yes, we're humans too, and we're continuously learning, just like you. And so there's a relatability there, right? That comes into play. And we're here in 2025, so the topic that everybody seems to want to get into really deep conversations about is where technology is going, where AI is going. How do you see AI reshaping at all how sellers and buyers are building their relationships? Where is this all headed, Brent?
You ask. I don't know. But here's a thought. At least where it's going in the short term is a way it seems to be going. is in many ways, AI is, goodness knows, vendors out there making amazing promises of what AI can do for you. And I think customers that is people involved in buying decisions, are excited about taking that for a test drive, right? So they're using AI to build RFPs, and they're using AI to compare seller or compare suppliers and do comparison, all that kind of stuff. And so that you just become column fodder. And so so in some ways it could run towards full on commoditization of suppliers. I think that's a possibility. I think the bigger, I'm sure, Dan, you've, just like all of us, you've played with AI at least either somewhat or substantially, right? But do you ever notice how, like, when you write a prompt and you get an answer and then you change the prompt just slightly and you get a completely different answer?
No.
Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yes. I've seen it
right?
many times.
So now let's say that you're trying to make a multi-million-dollar decision on behalf of your company with multi-year impacts and tied into infrastructure and goodness knows what else. And you put in a prompt in AI and it gives you an answer. And you think, okay, there's my answer. Let me just change this one thing, see what happens. And that gives you a totally different answer. Like, are you going to make a multi-million-dollar decision with multi-year implications based on that? Do you know what I'm saying? If nothing else, that just confuses you more. It's like, crap, now, excuse my language, but now what do I do, right? And I ran into this just the other day in a very, very simple way, going back to your B2C question earlier. I tell the story all the time now. I call it the dog food story. But I was on Instagram, and because that's how we all spend our time now, and trying to sleep because that doesn't work anymore, particularly because you're on Instagram. But and I was doom scrolling or whatever I was doing, or trying to avoid reality. But one way or another, the algorithm had figured me out, because it's figured all of us out. It started serving me ads for human grade dog food because I have a rescue dog, and somehow the algorithm figured out that I have a rescue dog. Like every rescue dog has got digestive issues, and I love my dog and I want to do right by it, right? So it's saying, if you were a better human being, Brent, what you would do is you would buy this human grade dog food, and here's a good ad for a couple seconds. So I finally, at some point, Dan, I give it. It's like, I'm a horrible human being. I'm not taking care of my dog. I need to make a decision and go buy some human grade dog food. So I decided what I'm going to do is what anyone would do now, is like, I'm going to go to AI and figure out, like, I'm going to do the whole RFP thing, right? So I asked AI, I was using Copilot, doesn't probably matter, but who are the top vendors in human grade dog food? What are their advantages, disadvantages? Give me their top 3 reviews. What's their pricing structure? What's their delivery model? What's their reputation for customer service? Everything I could possibly think of it. And I said, now output all that into a table, which I was pretty proud of myself because I'd never done a table. And I know I'm a very simple man. I'm from Nebraska, but and then I said, to give me a recommendation. So I got this table and I printed it out because, again, I'm old and we print things out, people our age, right? And so I took this piece of paper with the table on it and the recommendation down to the kitchen where my wife was. And I was all excited. He's like, honey, look what I did. I made eyes. I told her the whole story that I just told you. And I said, and I showed her, I said, so here's the recommendation and here's all the different choices. So what do you think we should do? And she looked and said, I don't know. What do you think we should do? And I looked at her and I looked at the table and I looked at her and I looked back at the table and looked at her again and said, I don't know. What do you think we should do? and finally what she said is, it's interesting, but you know what? I really wish we could just talk to somebody. I wish we could just talk to a couple of their dog owners to kind of see what they did. And I said, you're right. That would be so helpful. And I took that piece of paper and I set it down on the kitchen counter. And I'll be totally honest, this is a true story. And 3 weeks later, it's still sitting in the kitchen. We haven't done a thing with it. And I think somehow to think that AI is going to solve for, customers not feeling confident in themselves and making a decision. There's this amazing data point at Gartner, which is hugely controversial at the time. It's 75% of B2B buyers would prefer to buy without ever talking to a sales rep at all. We call that the rep-free experience. But I think what's become very, very clear to me in the interim since we produced that data point and I've moved on is that we never asked the question, so I can't say with certainty, but I would imagine 75% of B2B buyers would not prefer, they may prefer a rep-free experience, but I don't think they'd prefer a human-free experience. And this so begs this question, like, what happens when you show up a little less as a salesperson and a little bit more as a human being? And I think that's the opportunity in front of us right now, particularly in the face of AI.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens. And of course, another critical dynamic in this whole aspect of humanness is the impact of leadership in an organization. And I know you've worked in and around so many B2B go-to-market leaders. What do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
Well, let me ask you, I have some thoughts. What do you think it is, Dan? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, as a real advocate for what is referred to in this podcast as servant leadership, which is really more about empowerment and trust and transparency as opposed to command control. I think that's a key driver. When we talk about exceptional leaders that actually put their team ahead of their own personal ego in really
Yeah.
elevating their performance to support the objectives of the company. I mean, that in a nutshell is kind of where I put excellence versus just, okay and good enough.
That was actually, I'm glad I asked, because that was so crystallizing for me. That was super helpful, because it led me to, I guess I didn't really articulate this in my own head. A lot of what we're talking about, these themes about buying and selling and helping customers feel more confident in themselves, I don't have the bar charts to back this up, but it feels right, which is that feels like the right description of leadership as well. So imagine because I'm a researcher, I bake everything into 4 squares, right? And usually the top right is the square you want to be in. It's like BCG type stuff, right? But imagine one axis is, as a leader, I'm trying to get you to think certain things about me versus I'm trying to get you to think certain things about yourself. And it seems to me on that axis, really weak leaders or short-term leaders or leaders with short-term impact are all focused on enough about me. Now, what do you think about me? It's all focused on trying to get people to perceive them in a certain way.
Yes.
And we don't have to look very far around us right now to see leaders, people we would call leaders, working very, very hard on that end of the spectrum, trying to get people to think certain things, very positive things about them. And, I suppose the corollary being think negative things about their opponents, right? But what if the leader, very much like the sales rep I laid out earlier, was focused not on getting people to think certain things about, if I'm a leader and I'm focused on getting people to think, my team to get, love me, like me, think I'm amazing, think I'm smart. What if, as a leader, my goal was to get them to think something different about themselves, right?
Yes.
And what if I solved for that first? What if I solve, and maybe only for that? Like, how do I help people feel better about their own ability, better about their own agency, better about their own control over their world, feel safer, feel more seen? I think, it goes back to Robert Cialdini's work in so many different ways. It's his book Influence, which if your listeners haven't read it, it's so worth all of our time as human beings. But it seems to me that the best way to get someone to believe in you and to trust you is to be the agent by which they learn to believe and trust in themselves. So that's one dimension. And then the other is sort of a no-feel dimension, right? So when I think of great leaders, and even those who are focused on, their team and how the team perceives themselves, they're really, really great leaders. And I saw one just last week in a CRO named Cara Del Vecchio, who's at a division of Bloomberg. So much of what she does, and I think a lot of the great leaders I've known, is they absolutely are focused on getting their teams to know things, right? And this is the thing we all see in leadership books, like know your objectives, be clear on your objectives, cascade the priorities, make sure that everyone understands where the bus is going and are you on the bus or not on the bus. And so I want you to know all that kind of stuff. But so that's table stakes and really important. But the great leaders, I think you'd agree, Dan, right? They make you feel something.
Mm-hmm.
They make you feel something about yourself, first of all, like, I can do this. I belong here. I want to be part of this. And they help you feel part of something bigger. And frankly, as someone who's been chronically depressed in 6th grade, I don't know that this is why I've been an individual contributor my whole life, because I don't know that I'm really good about helping people feel good about themselves, but what the thing that really great leaders, I think they lean into positivity. They lean into optimism. They lean into, they're going to tell it to you straight. When things are tough, they're tough, and they got to be honest with you. The honesty is another, but broadly speaking, I think we're all motivated more strongly. Going back to Cialdini, he says we're more motivated by the avoidance of a downside risk than an upside potential. But I think nonetheless, when it comes to leadership, there's a strong motivation when someone can paint the vision of the castle on the hill and say, yeah, I want to be part of that. And I feel like I want to be part of that because I feel I like the version of me that exists in that world, and I will go there with you. So feel
really
and
resonates.
Itself. Yeah, there you go.
I
made that up on the fly based on what you said. I think but it feels right.
Yeah. And in my own book, The Impact Makers, I make the analogy in terms of exceptional leadership that it's about inflating rather than deflating. Right. And so again, it's if we shift our focus to how our team members feel internal to themselves, and what kind of impact are we having there? And we want to inflate, we want to boost confidence, we want to boost a focus on positivity. You mentioned all these things, which is really, again, what defines that leader that is not focused on their own self-ego, but they're thinking about something bigger. They're thinking about team first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree. And it's interesting is you look at great political leaders, you look at great religious leaders, the people that we revere in religions, if you cut back, you pare back all the stuff that's been added on over the years and all the trappings, everything. It's really what the human story has always been about, right? Things like the golden rule that exists in most major religions, most cultures around the world: do unto others as you'd have them do unto yourselves, right? It's like it's this powerful human connection that we have, the superpower that every single one of us can tap into. And that is the superpower of bringing good into the world by helping everyone else feel a little less alone, a little more connected, and a little bit more positive, not about the world perhaps, but about themselves, such that the world looks like just a little bit safer and a little bit more manageable, navigable.
Brent, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
The best piece of it's professional advice. I don't know if it's business advice, but it was back when I was writing my dissertation. My dissertation chair, this guy named Frank Donahue, who became my mentor and a very dear friend and has since passed, which is absolute tragedy, way too early and way too young. But I was struggling with my dissertation, Dan, as just about every grad student, it seems, does at some point. I was in a very, very dark place, and he sat me down. And this thing could have easily gone off the rails, and with it, many other things in my life. The collateral damage would have been significant. And he's looked at me and said, "Brent, the best dissertation is a finished dissertation." And this, for someone like me who'd been raised by a mom who's still around, and I love her very, very much, but my mom raised me somewhat tongue in cheek, but I always took it seriously, which was on me, not on her. She raised me, Dan, to believe that perfection is barely good enough. That's kind of how I grew up, right? And when you come at the world with perfection is barely good enough, you never get anything done, and you live in pain all the time. And for Frank to look at me in the eyes and say with an incredible sincerity and incredible earnestness, "Brent, the best dissertation is a finished dissertation." And knowing that he was going to be the ultimate arbiter of what got done gave me the permission to just get it done and move on with my life and my career. And I hear Frank's voice in my head all the time, Brent. When I'm working on building a business or writing this book and getting things out in the world, yes, I love to be, if I don't want to put anything out in the world, Dan, it's not of incredibly high quality, because I'm proud of it and I want to be proud of it and I want it to have real impact. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's not in the world, right? It doesn't matter if it's just in your head. I mean, it matters maybe a little bit to you, but the value that you bring is the value you put in the world. And from that perspective, the best dissertation is a finished dissertation.
What a relief. That probably took that 100-pound or 200-pound backpack right off your back, right? As you were getting that.
I still had to do the dang thing. but in my defense, that is my actual dissertation defense. So when you get your doctorate, right, you have to present it to your faculty, your dissertation committee, and you do your defense. And one of my members of my committee, he was flipping through it, and he of course had read it, and he knew all along what I was working on, everything. But he looked at me and said, "I've never said this about a dissertation on applied linguistics before. It was foreign language education." He says, "This is a page turner." He said, "This thing is just so riveting and so engaging," and it was incredibly gratifying. And I don't know that I could have gotten there if I'd actually tried to make that happen and held myself that standard. I would have never gotten it done. But because I had Frank in my corner,
you made
that's
it
where
happen.
I got. Yeah, that's right.
Now, you mentioned optimism a few minutes ago. When you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
Absolutely nothing. No. See, my dog's in the background barking right now. I don't know if you can hear her, but she's saying, "Where's my human grade dog food?" But so go get that table and figure out what you're going to order me. That's literally what she's saying right now. I feel guilty. What gives me optimism is the arc of history bends, so semi-quote Obama, bends towards justice and enlightenment. But unfortunately, I don't think it bends nearly as sharply as Obama suggested it does. So I think we have to go through long periods of just desperate pain. But if you look at this human story over the last, 15,000 years, it's been a story of learning our lessons and then sliding back, and learning our lessons and sliding back. But I think where we are right now in our world, and certainly in the U.S., and this isn't a red-blue comment, I promise you. It is, I think wherever one is, most of us, many of us feel quite lost or quite overwhelmed or scared or uncertain. And that is, it's really hard, I think, in this context, to find optimism, certainly on a daily basis. But where I find optimism is when I go through the Starbucks drive through and have a nice conversation with the person, the barista. When I go to Chipotle, which I do more than you could possibly imagine, and just have a lovely conversation with the people working there. When I just, talk to someone like you, Dan, on a podcast, I just this constant daily reminder that we're all just a bunch of schlubs just trying to figure it out. And if we can band together in our schlubness, that is band together in our common humanity and the reality that none of us know what we're doing, but together we can figure it out. That to me is when that moment comes, that's when we find optimism and we find it together.
Schlub is the word of the day. I just wrote it down. So we've got that covered. And as we wrap up our conversation, Brent, do you have any other final advice for leaders that are looking to drive B2B sales success and really elevate the performance of their teams?
It's just go read the challenge, the Framemaking Sale, right? It's good, but no, it is. But yes, do. But it is. It's the same theme over and over again. What if your single biggest opportunity to get what you want, which is sell more stuff in less time, was to focus not on customers' perceptions of you, but customers' perceptions of themselves? I think that reframe right there is incredibly powerful, and I think is the single biggest unlock to commercial growth right now.
Oh, that's a perfect way to wrap things up. Brent, thanks again for joining and really getting us to think differently about really going inside and looking at things from our customers' perspective and their own confidence, not just what we're projecting out in terms of our credibility and making it about us. It's not about us. It's about really understanding and connecting with customer. I really enjoyed our conversation.
It got deep, didn't it, Dan? But hopefully it was okay. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, man.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.